What a garbage fire. What are your favorite creative way to protest against pronouns in the comment section down below? I'm sorry, when who's not present? Did you say when they are not present? But isn't that a biological lie to call them they, them pronouns? Oh, hello, Raymond. Hello, pardon me, Raymond. Gotta go to the stream announcements. It's right here at Twitch. Ah, Raymond, I cannot see. Boom, that's published. Found this crazy YouTube video that was kind of popping off. Pronouns, why we should not play along. And I thought that title was really funny, especially because we is a pronoun. So it's like pronouns. Why pronouns should not play along. I've not seen this one before, so we are going in blind.
I thought I'd take a moment today to talk about pronouns. It's becoming increasingly common to see
I thought I'd take a moment today to talk about pronouns. She's already using them.
people putting pronouns in email signatures and on name tags and wearing buttons and badges that have third-person pronouns on them in order to instruct you how to think of them and how to refer to them.
The horror, people like telling other people the way to refer to them. If I wore a name tag that said Dr. Naomi, like once I have my doctorate, the horror, like I'm indicating to people that I am a doctor and want to be referred to by this information about me, which is true. Oh my gosh, the absolute horror.
It's also becoming increasingly common to be pressured to offer up one's own pronouns, even when you may not think to do that or wish to do that, just to be asked to include that.
Asked to include that versus pressured are very different things. Also, like in every kind of like, even like woke liberal college group that I've been in where people were like sharing pronouns, it was like an optional thing where it was like people would go in around in the circle, like introduce themselves, say their name, maybe like a little intro fun fact about themselves, and then they could say their pronouns if they wanted to. Like that's how it was when I did like my college orientation stuff, and I've never seen anybody like forced to share pronouns. So like I don't see that at all. But even if you're just like asked to share your pronouns, I mean, you would be going out of your way being difficult to be like, no, I don't use pronouns, instead of just being like, oh, I use she, her, or whatever.
Unlike you blue-haired liberals, I don't have pronouns. You will refer to me only by my name, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Like, that's just way easier to just answer directly, rather than being the difficult one. But I don't see people being pressured to do this in general.
For business purposes or for communication. And this was certainly the case in my graduate program that I've talked about quite a bit. I've addressed this as well, but I thought I'd go into it at length. I wrote a paper about this, I guess maybe like a year and a half ago. I really wanted to dissect the issue.
Okay. So her credentials are that she was in a graduate program where people asked her for her pronouns, I'm guessing, and then she wrote a paper about it because she was upset about the situation. That's a whole lot of like nothing.
Anybody who's interested in reading it, what it was that I found so troubling around the pronoun issue, of what it was that really made me uncomfortable and that it didn't seem right. But I wanted to dissect it, parse it, and really take a look at the issue. There's also a distinction to be drawn between giving one's own third-person pronouns and respecting another.
She's still saying nothing, but let's hear.
Unless you are somebody who wants to engage in that kind of pronoun euphemism game, I would encourage you not to play the game.
So her advice is, if you don't want to play the game, then don't play the game. That seems like the most basic nothing burger of advice I've ever heard. If you don't want to do X, then don't do X. Okay.
I won't say she, her when I'm asked for my pronouns, and I would encourage you not to play along with it either. But as far as respecting another person's pronoun requests, that's more of a maybe. That's more of a gray area, because
giving you the basic human decency and respect, that's more of a maybe. Yeah, that's more of a kinda.
It's going to depend on who that person is to you, how you actually perceive that person, and many other factors. So you are being asked, when you are asked to call somebody by the opposite sex pronouns or by a gender neutral pronoun like they, them, you're being asked to support a lie. And there are times.
No, you're not being asked to support a lie at all. Unless you think that the literal definition of she, her is like pussy queen baby factory. But it's pretty clear that throughout all of the history of the English language and the ways that we have referred to, say, like intersex women or infertile women or people who live socially as women, even though they weren't born biologically that way, because of how we functionally use pronouns, how we functionally see somebody, make an inference about their gender, and then call them she, her. that it's not lying about the biological basis of like having XX chromosomes or a fat vagoober. Like it's pretty clear that that's not how we functionally use pronouns or what pronouns literally mean, and so it's not a lie at all. Also, how would using they them pronouns be a lie? Because they them can also be a singular pronoun. And this is recognized, like broadly speaking, in dictionaries and has been used as a singular pronoun pretty much since the induction of the modern English language. Even Shakespeare used the singular they. How is that a lie? I'm really curious.
There are times when somebody just is too fragile to face the truth and you know it and you're taking care of them. Other times when it might feel appropriate. I mean, we could sit here and list examples, but I'll let you use your imagination.
She's not very good at arguing. This video is bad so far.
And I usually just don't use them at all because I don't necessarily.
I don't use pronouns at all. Okay, pronoun user.
It's not always appropriate to be confrontational about it, but I tend not to use opposite sex or gender neutral pronouns, but I do sometimes.
I tend to not use gender neutral pronouns. She's defeating herself.
Basic refresher on pronouns is that your first person pronouns are like I, me, mine, we, us. Second person is you, y'all, you guys. Third person is he, she, they, them, etc. So you're talking.
Honestly, her description of pronouns right there is better than the average conservative. I'll give her that. She did know the difference between first, second, and third person pronouns. So props to her for knowing that one at least.
About third person pronouns when you talk about pronoun preferences. And this is how you talk about someone when they're not present or when.
I'm sorry, when who's not present? Did you say when they are not present? But isn't that a biological lie to call them they them pronouns? Like you said?
When you're speaking to someone else about them. So
she just singular they'd them. She literally just singular they'd them. After saying that it's a lie to call them by pronouns other than their sex.
Being asked to use a specific set of third person pronouns is being asked by a person to help engage in reputation building on their behalf.
Reputation building on their behalf? Explain.
You're not being asked to lie to them, but you're being asked to lie about them and for them to others. And so this is how you.
She used the singular they so many times just there after calling it a lie.
Support their image of themselves in the world. You're engaging in a collusion with that person. If we all give our pronouns, then it softens the lie for these people who want you to lie for them.
Wait, what? How would it soften a lie if everybody's lying? That would just be now everybody's lying. Actually, the reason why trans people would ask for like normalization of like sharing pronouns is that way if somebody shares their pronouns, it doesn't automatically out them as trans. It was pretty common for people to like have their pronouns in their like email signature or on their like Twitter bio, profile, whatever. Then just because somebody puts their pronouns in bio doesn't necessarily mean they're trans. And so it just normalizes trans existence. It destigmatizes trans existence or even just trans persons asking for acceptance. It has nothing to do with a lie or like any denial of biological truth as we've established. She doesn't even know why people advocate for this. Like she doesn't even understand the opposing argument.
It softens that because it gives the illusion that we all do this. This is just how we engage with things. We don't know what a person's appropriate third person pronouns are unless that person informs us. So that's.
I mean, generally, you can make a pretty good guess as to what somebody's preferred pronouns would be, but absolutely, that is in no way the case. It's very common for people that are androgynous to get a mix of he, hims, and she, hers, depending on how people perceive them. It's also very common for people to like not accurately guess the pronouns of like a butch lesbian, for example, or like an intersex person, for example. There are lots of cases where what pronoun somebody might use or prefer isn't clear from just the way that they socially present themselves. And that's another reason why people might ask for pronouns if it's like a case where you're unsure, but you still want to be respectful. And I think that's perfectly valid.
It's the game that we're playing when we engage. So the question that was in my mind is this just some sort of new etiquette? Is this just neo etiquette? This is how we do things now? Is it harm?
Ooh, good question from Genesis Lazy Duck. A silly question. When the pronoun incredulity goes beyond reason, i.e. helicopter gender, is referring to them as the stated pronouns over what they identify with on purpose a reasonable tactic. I've done it, but I still doubt to make fun of a chud, but they said it made me think about a little more how pronouns made them feel. So my take on this is that what makes a gender identity valid is that it's sincere, is that it's in good faith. So if somebody is in good faith, believing that they're a woman, like somebody who's a trans woman, it's like, okay, you know what? I know I'm trans. I know that I'm a woman. And they know that deep down that they're a woman to me. Absolutely. I'll call them she, her. If somebody is making an art, like making one of these claims in bad faith, like, haha, I identify as an attack helicopter, I think that you can say, no, you don't. You're a bad faith actor. That identity isn't sincere. And that's disrespectful to people who do sincerely have identities like a trans woman. I would just call them out on their insincerity. And I think that sincerity is a pretty big indicator of like gender identity in general. Kind of the moment when somebody actually becomes the other gender is when they identify as that gender and they believe it. I think that's a really big step in trans people's journey. I know that for me, that actually believing it was a bit of an emergent property. The moment that I started actually believing it was when it made sense for everybody to call me a trans woman and a woman. So yeah, that's my take on that situation. But very good one for like testing the boundaries.
And it seems to be that a lot of people are taking it as such, but I would argue that it is not. And
Ooh, let's see how sharing pronouns is harmful. Let's go.
I think for three main reasons. And I think it's because, for one thing, it undermines confidence and resilience.
How does it undermine self-confidence, resilience to say, I am confident in myself. I know that these are the pronouns I want to go by. Please call me by those pronouns. Like, to me, that actually seems like a display of self-confidence.
The illusion that one's self-concept is dependent on external validation by others.
No, not at all. Because you can assert your pronouns, and somebody can be a dick and misgender you, and you can still be like, well, them being a dick doesn't invalidate my identity. You can still want people to respect your identity, even though you recognize that them being a dick and misgendering you doesn't invalidate your identity. So no, it doesn't do that at all.
Second reason is that it endorses and encourages narcissistic behavior.
Encourages narcissistic behavior. I'm interested in hearing her explain that one.
Perpetuates gender confusion for children, which is really concerning.
And it creates and perpetuates gender confusion for children. Is she going to elaborate on these? I hope she does.
The first reason, undermining self-confidence. It's a pro-fragility mindset, because like I said, when you're making a decision about whether you're going to lie for someone or to them, there are times when we do that. There's the white lie, there's the gentle lie. You don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And so you prop them up. Maybe somebody's going through grief that's really difficult and they can't handle something hard right now. And so you're just going to soften that. Maybe somebody is,
yeah, so all of this argument on the first one is going to presuppose that by using somebody's pronouns, you are lying to them, even though she has multiple times used a singular they. So I guess singular theys aren't actually lying. Defining she, her, and he, him based off of biological sex characteristics is nonsensical when we think about how we use them in a social setting, how we look at somebody externally, observe their social presentation, assume what their pronouns are, and call them by those pronouns, based on how we routinely assign pronouns to people who are intersex, to people might not have all these biological characteristics, which you might think they do, and just in the lived experience of trans people who are routinely perceived and treated as the other gender. Those are all realities which she is denying by claiming that like pronoun usage is a lie.
Classic one is like, do I look fat in this dress? Or, so you want to say, you look great, or you find something positive to comment on. So, those kind of examples, we can think of times that we do that. And when we do that, I don't know if I should say always, but we're almost always doing it because we are worried about the impact of the truth on that person, because there's a fragility there. There's something that they would be hurt, and we're protecting them. And so when we engage in the pronoun game, we're doing that same thing. We're treating them as if they are fragile.
You may be thinking of them as fragile. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually fragile. For example, if somebody misgenders me, it really doesn't affect me. I get misgendered all the time online, being an out and outspoken trans woman. Like, it doesn't hurt me if somebody misgenders me. I'm not fragile about that. But she's going to assume that I'm fragile because to her it's like a fragility complex. Like, she's just projecting here.
It upholds an illusion.
And her entire argument presupposes that using pronouns for somebody is a lie, which it's not. So it fails on premise and conclusion.
That misgendering somebody, failing to confirm their illusions, is abusive and violent. You know, the idea that someone's self-concept.
I mean, depends on how you misgender somebody, but often the vitriolic ways that transphobes misgender me online can absolutely be characterized as abusive and harassment. It depends on like what your criteria for constituting violence would be, but like abuse and harassment, absolutely, depending on how it's phrased.
So fragile that you're going to hurt them and they're going to be wounded. Not being affirmed from outside that's really unfortunate, and it's really sad. And I have compassion for that, the experience, what that must be like. But we need to ask deeper questions and look for other ways to help people who are feeling that fragile, not just continue to mislead them. And if you are so unhappy with yourself that you are rejecting yourself through asking others to uphold a lie about you, and even then going
Still presupposing the lie, which she has not demonstrated.
on to do cosmetic and medical interventions in order to change your physical body.
She just admitted that it changes your physical body. So how is it a lie? Like, if you're doing medical interventions which actually change your physical body, how are you lying then? What?
In permanent and painful ways.
Permanent and painful ways? Taking my estrogen is not painful. It's actually quite happy and a very good experience for me.
Is it loving for those around you to support that illusion that leads you down that path towards dysfunction and fragility?
Oh yeah, there's a really good nickname analogy we can make here. Thank you, Pup Tetris. Like, if somebody has a name tag that has their like legal name on it, and then they ask you to call them by a nickname. So say your friend has their legal name Nicholas on their ID, but they're like, "Oh hi, I'm Nick. I'd like it if you call me Nick." Are you lying by calling them Nick? Are they being fragile by asking you to call them Nick, or is that them recognizing, hey, I like to be understood and referred to socially in that way because that's how I see myself? Yeah, call me Nick. But like if somebody called him Nicholas, they would probably just be like, "Oh, I prefer to go by Nick, but yeah, I guess that is my legal name." Like, that's probably how people would respond in the situation. It's very analogous to the pronoun situation.
And continued self-harm. And so that's a question. And I'm
sorry, did she just say that gender transition treatment is continued self-harm? When literally all available peer-reviewed data and evidence shows that it reduces depression, suicidality, anxiety, like all of these medical conditions which are actually harming people improve drastically with access to gender-affirming treatment. So no, it's quite literally the opposite of causing harm.
It's not loving to foster fragility in someone that you care about. So another way that
by calling him Nick, you are fostering fragility and not loving him.
The second reason that I listed was that it endorses and fosters narcissism.
Oh yeah, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Interpersonally exploitative behavior, like I'm using you in order to reflect the image of myself that I want to see. Entitlement, which is you owe it to me to affirm what I say.
Don't all of these arguments apply to somebody asking to be called by a nickname? They literally do.
Lack of empathy, which is I don't care what you really think or feel. I want you to do it my way. And arrogance, which is I'm going to say that I'm hurt. You hurt me. You have to do what I say. You have to bend to my will, or I'll say you're harming me.
All of these arguments could apply to a nickname, by the way. And also, that's not how trans people, like, ask to not be misgendered. Like, if you've ever misgendered a trans person, like, in person, or even a cis person in person on accident, they're usually going to be like, "Oh, actually, it's she," or like, "Oh, I actually, it's he." Like, they're usually pretty nervous about even correcting you in general. Like, I don't know. It seems that her entire knowledge of, like, people reacting to misgendering is watching, like, SJW cringe videos on YouTube in, like, 2016. Like, that seems to be her entire knowledge of how people would react to being misgendered, not, like, actually talking to a trans person about it.
Through playing with pronouns, we really are encouraging all of these traits, which
by playing nicknames, we are encouraging all of these traits.
Create a mirroring effect and a narcissistic perspective and outlook. And so the third reason that I gave is that it causes gender confusion in children. It encourages this. I mean, you've got little kids who are coming into understanding the culture that they live in and the world around them, and they're being presented.
And I think that kids understanding this culture and this world should also know the fact about the world that some people are transgender and that transgender people might go by different pronouns than what you'd expect. That's just a fact about the world that anybody who is going to be educated about society and culture and the world needs to understand the world, that trans people exist. And by the way, trans people existing aren't confusing to kids at all. Like, by the age that they can understand, like, boy, girl, gender, etc., just the idea of Naomi used to be a boy and now she's a girl, so we call her she because she's a girl. Kids understand that.
This idea their physical bodies are malleable to match some mental state.
There's plenty of healthy ways that you can tell kids that their physical bodies are malleable to match their mental state. For example, if you want to get really strong and swole, you can hit up the gym and train really hard, and you can become a fast runner, or you can become strong and muscular. Like, there are plenty of ways, or talking about, like, eating a healthy diet to maintain, like, a healthy weight. There are so many ways that we tell kids that their mental state and the actions they take will affect their physical body, and that they can change their physical body in positive ways if they put their mind to it. Like, we do that all the time.
Some mental perception.
If you eat your food, if you eat your vegetables, you're gonna grow up real tall. If you eat your carrots, you're gonna have good eyesight. Like, we do this stuff to kids all the time.
It's normalizing a medicalization of puberty.
I don't think so at all, because, like, there are plenty of trans people that maybe their transition is just entirely social. They just want to go by different pronouns, a different name, just do a social transition, and their transition isn't medicalized at all. Actually, most trans youth, according to available data we have, don't medically transition. Most trans youth are either pretty happy with their body, maybe they're non-binary, maybe they just want to socially transition, but most trans youth, including most trans youth who are diagnosed with gender dysphoria, actually don't medically transition. That's just a fact about the data that we have right now. You can look at, like, the Reuters data on trans youth, and there are way more gender dysphoria diagnoses than trans youth on puberty blockers or cross-sex hormones. For most of them, it's just about how they want to be socially, and that's awesome.
Kids are uncomfortable with their developing bodies and their identities. We go through an identity crisis in adolescence, and we're supposed to be looking for who we are. And if we add this in, it's not adding something positive. And
well, who you are might be transgender. And for the 99% of transgender people who don't regret their transition at all, being able to identify that they're transgender younger is going to have profound benefits on their mental health and overall well-being for the rest of their lives. They very well may be transgender, and that could be what's causing the identity crisis of everybody telling them you have to be a boy when that's not who they are. That's not who they want to be. That's not what's right for them.
There are plenty of places you can go to have that conversation, but so I'm just
like
gonna
a
scratch the
psychiatrist.
surface there.
Yeah,
but
you can talk to a psychiatrist.
the conundra about this is that it's difficult to figure out how to decline when you're asked for pronouns. I mean, if you're being asked, for instance,
Yeah, because it's pretty rude to decline answering when you could answer with 2 words, like, oh, she, her. It's really that simple. And being like, no, I don't use pronouns. I don't believe in that woke ideologue. Like, that's fragility right there.
in my graduate program, we'd be all sitting around in a new classroom, introducing ourselves, going around the room and state your name and your pronouns and something about yourself.
I took a graduate sociology course and nobody was requested to share their pronouns, by the way. I mean, there are certainly circles where people are like, oh, like, say your pronouns, but I've never seen somebody, like, be, like, pressured, like, hey, you didn't say your pronouns. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, nobody does that.
You also might receive a notice from your boss or from HR asking you to add it to your email signature. There might be other ways in which this is being requested of you, and how should you go about declining? Not everybody's going to be able to get away with declining, because you might have somebody who's the job.
Trying to say that, like, being asked to put your pronouns in, like, your email signature by, like, HR is, like, being demanded of you. I have never seen an institution that, like, requires that. Even, like, across institutions, it's very inconsistent whether or not people are going to put whatever, like, kind of formatting in email signatures or other kind of personal information or bios. Like, to suggest that, like, across the board corporations are now mandating this is just crazy when looking at the actual descriptive reality of the world.
On the line, if you don't comply or there might be something that's so critical about complying with this for you that you have to do it. And I understand that. And that's going to be different
I've
depending on
never
your
heard of that
situation.
happening. Like she's insinuating that people are like, you're gonna be fired if you don't put pronouns in bio. Like where?
But if you're able to decline, I would encourage you to do so and not to give in to peer pressure, because it is a lot of pressure. And so there's a few ways you could decline. One is that you could just come right out and say that you don't support it and you think it's unhealthy. If you want to do that, that's bold and
You'll look
right to the
crazy if you
point.
say that, like in
And
public.
some people will feel comfortable doing that. You can simply decline. Just say as it comes around to you, I decline to offer pronouns. And because this is inherently euphemistic and it's this
That's
sort
kind of
of,
mysterious. If somebody would say that, I'd be like, that person's mysterious. I don't know what's up with them.
it's this sort of like politeness ritual. Usually if you decline something in a polite way, because you haven't broken out of that polite exchange, you've remained respectful, the onus then is on the other person to be the one to breach that and to break the illusion that we're all being really nice here. And so you're usually going to get away with that because they're not going to want to do that. You might not always get away with it, but as long as you stay respectful, you're usually going to be, especially if it's on the spot and
I mean, it's like, at that point, it's like the people that respond to like surveys and questionnaires where it's like, what's your gender? I choose not to specify. What's your race? I choose not to specify. Like, it's a little bit mysterious, but whatever.
in an in-person situation, you're going to probably get away with that.
You might get asked
depending on your
why,
demeanor.
but
You can say, what my favorite one was to say, I have no special requests, because then I'm not playing. I'm not going to give you pronouns for myself. I'm not going to contribute to the idea that you can't tell that I'm female.
okay, so they say, I have no special requests. I'll be like, he just made a great point. He doesn't have special requests. We can call him by whatever pronouns he wants.
By looking at
You
me.
want.
But I'm also framing it as a special request, so that if somebody does have some reason why they know that they present
If somebody says that, you know that they're trolling, and you can troll them back harder.
androgynously or
You've seen this Naomi
differently
TikTok?
than they want to present, then it still honors the fact that they're able to make that request. So that was my favorite one. I heard somebody else once say, I don't have any preferred pronouns, but please use what you feel is appropriate for me. And so that was a very polite way to put it as well. And I think it sort of had the same effect, just that politeness was something that nobody was going to challenge in the moment because it was done with a nice tone. I hope that this is helpful or
I mean,
or
people might troll you back a bit. I would if it was like
to think
online.
about.
Talking to
I'd
someone
like to
silly like
hear
this.
what other people think as well. If you've got any creative ways that you've pushed
Have you
back
seen
against
this
this
Naomi
in
TikTok?
your school or workplace, or
Share your favorite creative way to protest against pronouns in the comment section down below. She's actually doing it.
wherever this is happening in your life. And yeah, I just encourage you.
Oh yeah, I guess the less trolly response would be like, oh, so she, her then? They either say yes or no.
If you're finding that this is uncomfortable for you and you're not wanting to go along with it, I would encourage you that to not go along with it if you are able to not do that. And thanks very much for listening.
And then once again, that if you don't want to do this, I would encourage you to not do it if you don't want to. If you don't want to do X, then don't do X. So profound, so profound. She never even tried to provide an argument why using pronouns is a lie. Like, that was presupposed into her entire video. What a garbage fire. So many of her arguments relied on that presupposition, which she never justified. Because she can't. It's a point that does not stand.